You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. My bad.
All right, we're rolling.
Okay.
Yo and hello, welcome to another episode of the League of Fantasy Legends podcast. I'm your host, Pistons Wish. I am joined as always by Biscuit. Biscuit, how are you this morning?
Doing very well. A little different doing things in the morning, but I got the coffee, so I guess we'll pull through here.
There we go. Yeah, we couldn't wait till Sunday night. We had to get this thing out because we are here to preview the MSI tournament in our fantasy competition that we are hosting through the Ego app. Our friends on the Ego app putting together this competition, and we are going to preview it, give you all the tips, strategies that you need to win this tournament. As you can see, for those of you watching, I've got the prize pool up here on the screen. First place in the whole competition is $5,000. $5,000 for first place, and I think someone who listens to this is going to win it because we're going to tell you everything you need to know. And maybe it'll be you, Biscuit.
I'm going to Disney if that's the case.
$5,000, that'll get you a day or two in Disney, and I'll root for you there. So everyone, you gotta join in here. Mobafire.egoapp.gg. The whole tournament sponsored by Mobafire. You can catch that link on the description of this episode. You can catch it on our Twitter, that's at LFL Pod. You can catch it in our Discord channel, which you can find also in the description of this episode and also on our Twitter. Here's how it looks. Go ahead and get in here. You got to join our specific competition. You hit leagues, you hit discover leagues, you hit private leagues. You throw in that invite code coming here. It's 1400. Those are not zeros, those are O's. ENJSNK. I'm not going to read it again. Find it on our Twitter. Find it in the description of this episode. Blah, 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 so on and so forth. Get in this league. We're going to have a bunch of fun.
And just to confirm,
Yes.
Does it matter if the letters are lowercase or uppercase?
I have no idea.
Awesome. All right, moving on.
So MSI, new format this year. I am stoked about it. It's going to be better. No best of ones. It's kind of a wild thing. No group stage. Kind of like a group stage, especially for a fantasy competition. But nonetheless, it's going to be awesome. The MSI format, so we got a play-in stage. I've got the bracket up here on your screen, although apparently I have a bracket without any teams put in there, so that's kind of lame. This kind of shows how the bracket will run. So you got Group 1, that's the group with BLG, that's the group with Golden Guardians, that's the group with Gigabyte Marines. So Golden Guardians, Gigabyte Marines will play in the first round. You got BLG versus Movie Star, Rainbow 7. Big underdogs there. Winners of those will play. You win 2 games, you advance. We'll get 3 teams that advance out of this play-in stage into the main stage. And for this fantasy competition, it's a totally different lineup. So you set your lineup for the play-in stage, then it'll totally wipe. You'll get a new chance to set your lineup for the main stage. And so, as we look at this, Biscuit, we're looking at what we're trying to hit here as far as fantasy players that we pick. Obviously, we want players that are going to win 2 games. So if you win the first 2 games, big favorites there is BLG and G2. Then the interesting thing about it is that this last, they call it the loser final, to see who the third team that gets out of their groups will be. That one's not actually going to count for the fantasy competition just because it'd be an extra game, kind of unfair. And so what we're looking to get is players that go 2-0, players that go 2-1. You lose the first one, you win 2 more, you'll get into that loser's final. So realistically, there's going to be 2 good picks from each group. Do you have any upset picks as we look at it here? It'll be BLG and hopefully Golden Guardians on one side, G2 and someone else on the other side. Do you have an idea of what you're looking at here?
Are we talking just straight?
Straight up, who's going to win?
Excuse me. Straight up, who's going to win? So I think the money would have to be on BLG just because they're coming from the strongest region.
Yep.
So I see them, taking care of business in their first match against Movie Star Rainbow 7. Incredible name, by the way.
Yes.
And I think we might see. I mean, how do you feel as far as like the second match in Group A in regards to Golden Guardians and Gigabyte Marines? I know, at least the last time I saw Gigabyte in a tournament such as this, they were pulling off some upsets, at least in some games, right?
Hmm.
I think they might. Do you think they might have like the ability to take down Golden Guardians, or how do you feel about that matchup?
Yeah, they beat Top Esports in that ridiculous game in group stage of Worlds. Um, North America's always had pretty good success against Vietnam. Can they drop a couple games to them? Yeah, but I think in a best of 5, best of 3 series, I think Golden Guardians should be fine. But certainly BLG the favorite to go 2-0. I like Golden Guardians. And Group B, G2, obviously the big favorite. Then you got to choose one between Loud, PSG Talon, and DFM. Loud, I believe, from Latin America. PSG Talon from, oh gosh, I don't even remember the name of the league. But they've been
Uh,
around here. The PCS, I believe. And
yeah,
then,
they are from PCS. I don't know
yep,
what that stands for exactly,
yep.
but yeah.
And then DFM, the Japanese team. We've seen them in the last couple of international tournaments. Who are you picking
Right.
from those 3 teams just to win?
So if I had to pick a team between again Loud, PSG, and DFM, I guess I'm gonna have to go PSG. Just
Hmm.
and we'll get into that a little bit further as we talk about lineups because I do have a few players from them, so kind of trying to pull for them. But yeah, I mean, like you said, G2 heavy favorite. I feel like in that group, hopefully they take care of business and get people the points that they're looking for.
Yep. I was between PSG and Loud. Now DFM did make some noise in the playing stage for Worlds, but they've lost Evie from the top lane, so I like Loud. I think Loud and PSG Talon. I think that'll be interesting. Loud will, of course, have the pressure on if they lose to G2 in the first round, which you would expect will happen. But we'll see. G2 was not great in the second split uh, so far this year. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the fantasy, just like the format of this tournament. Basically, you're going to pick your team. Each player will have a price. You have to stay under $1,000, and just trying to put together the best team. And so, obviously, the first thing is if you lose both games, then not only do you not score well in those games, but you don't get to play a third. And so, obviously, trying to choose from teams that win. Then again, you're going to see that the BLG players, the G2 players, they are the most expensive for obvious reasons. So you're not going to be able to load your lineup with them so much. You can only have 2 players per team. You can't load up with all one team. The scoring format is pretty interesting. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, except for that the scoring is different for per position. It's kind of an interesting wrinkle that's different than what we've seen in the leagues that we usually talk about. And that really kind of changes everything, to be honest. Everyone gets zero point 0.4 points per kill, but the points beyond that are different. Support assists are way buffed. You get way more points for that. The CS score in this format is actually really, really high. And so one of the biggest strategies in this tournament is to pick players that are going to farm. And so that puts a ton of pressure on your top lane pick for 2 reasons. One being that the score is already buffed. They're already getting more points per CS. And plus, when you look at the top lane, the farming difference between a carry top laner and a tank top laner can be wild. If you get a player that's going to split and just rack up the farm, that's actually the best way to get points in this format, as opposed to someone who's going to group, give up the farm. And so that kind of puts some pressure on some of your picks. There'll be also objective scoring. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the scoring here.
Yeah, I got it up on my end too.
There you go. Yeah, I've got it here. So if you're watching along, you can see that if you somehow end up with a support that farms like the old Senna lanes, then you'll basically win the matchup straight up. Extra 0.05 points per creep score for the top lane of the jungle compared to the mid and bot lane. And so what that does, we've done this format for 3 different things now, being Worlds and then the 2 LEC splits so far, is that almost across the board, top lane is the highest scoring. The bot lane from teams that do well score really well, but they're not very consistent. The mid lane is way nerfed because of all this. Excuse me.
Doing tight.
Jungle as well. And so, it really kind of puts the onus on the top lane and the bot lane. Got the objective points here. Thing to know, a win is worth 2 points. And as we get into the best of series, the interesting thing is you're going to get the points that you get is going to be the average. So you'll get 1 one score per series rather than one score per game, if that makes sense. And so, a 3-game sweep, you're going to score a lot higher than a 5-game series. So with all that being said, a couple last things to note. One is the captain. So each day you can assign a captain. That captain's going to get 1.5 point bonus, or 1.5 times the point bonus. And so you're going to try to put that on your player that's going to score highest. And the thing about it is you can set it each day, even though not every team plays every day. And so you really need to, one, be on top of assigning your captain every day to make sure you get the most points. And two, make sure your lineup allows for you to have someone that you can assign captain every day. Otherwise, you're missing out on that bonus. And then the last thing to add is the sell token. You get 1 sell token per stage. So you get 1 for the playing stage, 1 for the main stage. And basically, you can sell a player and replace them with someone else as long as you still have the salary to pick them. So
coming in under salary cap, right?
Right. So you can't use the sell token to get around the salary cap. So
right.
if you picked someone that has the lowest salary and you don't have any money left over, then you're really not going to be able to sell them because there's no one to sell them for.
Right.
So all that being said, that's pretty much the fantasy format. I know that was a lot of words. You can find it all on the Ego app. They've got it listed out pretty well. Anything to touch on with that? I'm sure I missed something before we get into the general strategies to go for.
Yeah. I mean, did you mention point padding? I think you might have touched on it.
You know what? I did not mention point padding.
Okay, yeah. So you just want to keep in mind, there's going to be point padding for teams that play less games, just due to the success and the points that they could potentially get. So it is something to keep in mind when picking your team, obviously, especially if you're looking at players on maybe teams you consider not as good as some of the other teams and players that are available. And then I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think that's one of the biggest differences, at least I know for me, right, coming from the fantasy coverage that we usually do. Obviously, we're used to doing LCS, and it's like a week-to-week thing. But when you get into tournaments like this is it's like daily fantasy, right? And not only is it daily fantasy wherein you gotta, like you mentioned, pick your captain and make sure you have a captain when setting your lineup, which is unbelievably important. I know the first time I did this, I lost a tremendous amount of points just by not doing that. And again, keeping up on it daily, I feel is definitely different, something you have to get used to.
Yep.
So you definitely want to keep that in mind. And then we'll get into some of the strategies here. But yeah, it's just really all about, making sure that you're overseeing everything that you need to, again, on a daily basis. I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be clear on the point padding, they'll only get it if you play less games due to success. And so the way we say that is, if you go 2-0, then you'll only play 2 games. If you go 2-1, then you'll play 3. And so they're not trying to punish success. And so what will happen is, say BLG wins their first 2 games, they'll get a third score of point padding, which will be their average score so far in the tournament. And so that way, they're not getting punished compared to Golden Guardians. If they win and then lose and then win, they've got 3 games, they'll score higher. So point padding, it's a big piece. Another thing to note is they're not counting the last chance game, the match that will determine the last team to get in. This is the one that you would expect if everything goes the way you would think. It would be Golden Guardians versus one of those teams from Group B, Loud, PSG Talon maybe. So that gives you 4 teams that you're really trying to identify, 2 on each group. I want to talk about strategies. The first thing we talked about was the captain slot. We already kind of touched on it, but you definitely want to make sure that you switch it each day that you can and try to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So make sure your lineup will allow you to have someone playing every day. Now, obviously, since it's a bracket, you don't know if they'll be upper bracket, lower bracket. You can't really know 100%. Do you want to talk about some other general strategies as far as maybe, and we already kind of touched on it, but how to prioritize where to spend your money?
Yeah. So just going down the list here, definitely want to prioritize your lineup. You mentioned going top lane perhaps is one of the better strategies, at least wanting to put perhaps like more of your allocation money into a player from the top just because of the CS score that, again, the top position, the jungle position do get in a tournament like this. So that's definitely something to consider. You also want to keep in mind the scoring difference for like supports, like, obviously if you follow any kind of fantasy, League of Legends, they tend to get all their points or the majority of their points from assists. So in a tournament like this, they do have a higher assist point allocation for, again, when they do get those assists. So that's something to also keep in mind. And then just understanding the difference in scoring, I think, across the board is something that you want to at least keep in mind, because as we touched on a little bit earlier, like there is different scoring when comparing top and jungle as opposed to like mid and the bot lane, right, or AD carry. Again, kills are the same across the board, but the rest of the statistics that they'll be scored against are a little bit different. So I think that's something that you definitely at least want to keep in mind, again, when building your lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And so, you would think that probably because the top lane scores the most, that you're going to want to spend more of your money there. Then again, because a lot of the points will come from just CSing, maybe it's not quite as important to get a player that wins because they'll score higher anyways. Definitely some interesting things to touch on there. And so let's talk about putting our lineup together. So we've got some specific teams. We're going to look at which players you really like. As we go into the app here, you can kind of see, well, at least I should say, they'll show you who is the most picked player. And if you look at it here, it's Ben at 44%. That's also who I have as a must-have. Just because, well, first of all, they're the best team. Ben will play carries, and the top lane is the high scoring position. So it makes sense you're going to spend up there. Are there any other players that you are really looking at trying to fit in your lineup?
Right. So again, this is, for me personally, it's something that I'm not familiar with. I feel like when we do just like our regular LCS fantasy, like I'm like, hey, this is my definitive statement. I kind of believe in, but this is like me learning to swim kind of for the first time. So I'm just taking all the feedback, because I know you got a little bit more time or experience, I should say, with this type of format. So, I definitely think Ben is a good pick, again, based on everything that we've already discussed and some of the stuff that we had discussed previously. But I think, me personally, again, just looking through all the rules, I think one of the bigger things that I'm trying to keep in mind is the better team, right? So for me, I think we both agree that BLG is the best team in the play-in. So I definitely wanted to prioritize 2 players from that team.
Yep.
So for my lineup, I have actually Elk at the AD carry spot.
Are you going full reveal right now?
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
you can. You can.
No, I won't go. I don't want to go full reveal now.
Okay.
We're going to obviously get into it a little bit further. But again, I went Elk for AD carry, and then I'm going to totally butcher the name. I think it's Yagao.
Oh, yeah. Yagao, yep.
Yeah, Yagao in the mid lane. So I wanted to prioritize 2 players. They're definitely 2 of the higher, more expensive players at their position. But I wanted to make sure I had those 2 players, again, ensuring that I had 2 players from the best team that I consider the best team in the play-in.
Right, and as we look at it, so I'm going to go ahead and try to pull up some of these prices here. Yagao is at 208, which is actually one of the cheapest BLG players. The only cheaper one is On, who's their support. So if you're trying to get 2 BLG players but also fit in a pretty decent lineup, I don't mind that at all.
Right.
Yeah. Another player I have circled here as kind of a must-have is Yike from G2. And I don't know if you watched much of the LEC this split. I actually did a good bit because of this fantasy competition. And Yike is a player that will take a lot of resources, and that's such an important thing to think about in this competition. And so we see, again, such an emphasis on farming in the scoring system. We see Yike play Lilia, we've seen him play Bel'Veth, we've seen him play Kayn, we've seen him play, a lot of these champions that are just going to kind of eat up farm and score well because of that. And he, kind of takes a good chunk of his team's kills. Now, to be fair, in the last group of playoffs, he played a couple Maokai games, and that's terrifying. That's the last thing you want to see from your jungler. And also G2, they got like 5th place in that split, right? They didn't do great. But with them being such heavy favorites, and we've seen Yike have some really nice carry performances, that's a player I'm really trying to fit into my lineup. Problem is, he's also priced really high. So trying to get Ben and Yike in the lineup, Ben and Yike in the lineup has not been, you really have to save in other spots to get both.
Right. So I was going to say, do you think that, just taking a look again at the prices, I believe Yike is the most expensive jungler. Does that, I know you kind of touched on as far as fitting everybody under the cap, does that kind of, would you say it's an absolute lock you have to have Yike, or is it more of like, I would really like to have them?
I would really like to have him.
Okay.
I don't think it's quite a lock. I think his price is just a little bit high. As we look at the junglers, let me see. Yeah, he is. He's more expensive than, is that Zun, you think? XUN from BLG? Zun? He's actually $8 more expensive than Zun. And so, that's scary for sure. I think Yike, if they go 2-0, like we expect them to, I think he'll be the top scoring jungler. But is it worth picking him and having to put value at other spots? I'm not sure. But certainly, I do definitely like Yike. I like Yike. Like Yike.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Like Mike, like Yike. Anyways. Yeah, any players you're avoiding? Who are you like, nah, I'm not putting them. I don't care how cheap they are.
Right, so I'm actually going to go on the opposite spectrum as far as players to avoid in terms of pricing. So I'm not going to go as far as like the cheaper players. But I think
that's what we want.
I think you know who I'm going for here. But one of the players I'm looking to avoid is going to be Caps, just because of that price.
Yep.
I think he has one of the higher prices, especially at the mid. I think he's second, it looks like. So I think you can find other value in position. I know, like I took Yagao just because I think they are the best team in the whole play-in. But no, like you said, I think they're coming off G2. That is coming off a down split, I guess you would consider it. So I'm not sure if they're going to be on their best game. You would think so, even because we obviously spoke that they were heavy favorites, or definitely favorites at the least. But who knows? Maybe one of these teams sneaks up on them. So I don't know. I would be a little bit cautious there.
Yeah. Caps is at 207. He's the second most expensive mid laner, behind only Yagao, who's only $1 more at 208. So expecting big things from Caps. And the truth is that Caps, while he was, he wasn't that great this split. None of G2 was, but he hasn't had the carry performances. It's been Yike and it's been Hansama, and to an extent it's been a little bit of Broken Blade too. So I'm looking at, I don't think we've even mentioned this spreadsheet that you've put together that essentially takes the stats from the last domestic split, so like the spring split from all these different regions, which of course you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt, because as good as Rainbow 7 was, they were playing against teams in their own region, they weren't playing against BLG. With that being said, Caps, I believe, is way down at the bottom of the mid laners in this... Gosh, I shouldn't talk before I look.
If we're talking just like points per game.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's because you had it. Yeah, I now see that it's ordered backwards. I was like, gosh, he's sixth. He's the sixth best player out of everyone. No, he's the sixth worst player out of everyone. Strictly in terms of points per game, it goes support, Caps, support, and then 4 junglers. His stats were not good in the spring split. And so, as good as he may be, I think he's a great player. I don't think they're playing through him. I don't think he's going to rack up kills, and I'm not picking him. I totally agree with you. Anyone else you're avoiding? I've got here that even if you're trying to get some value, you cannot pick anyone from Rainbow 7. And unfortunately, as much as I would love to pick anyone from GAM, the Gigabyte Marines from Vietnam, I just think they got the bad draw, being in the same group as BLG and Golden Guardians. I think they will probably go 0-2 as well, so I'm probably avoiding both GAM and Rainbow 7.
Yeah, I think outside of just players in particular, I think a lot of it does come down to what teams that you believe in.
Oh yeah.
I feel like outside of G2 in Group B, again, I don't I've never done a deep dive on the teams, but I
Uh-huh.
feel like they're pretty similar. And maybe I'm way off on that, just saying that. So, but I think you probably want to obviously avoid the team that you think is going to be the worst in the group. Even if you're like looking at some statistics and pricing and whatnot, and you do find what you consider value for a certain team.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me personally, I know even before we started the episode, we were kind of talking lineups, and I had some players from Detonation Focus Me,
Uh-huh.
the Japanese team. And I just, now that I look at it and just, again, going through the exercises that we are, I'm not sure I would want to take any players from that team just because I think they are going to end up being the worst of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And then just some of their players looks like a little bit more on the expensive side in terms of like the points per dollar. So I would just stay away from that team in general. And then, probably any players I should say on teams that you don't feel are going to really do that well.
Right. Right. Yeah. And as we start looking into some of those minor region teams, because someone in Group B is going to get through to that final game. Someone in that group is going to go 2-1 that's not G2. And who's that going to be? So I've pulled up the group stage from the last World Tournament. And obviously not
Okay.
all the teams are the same, but we've got Loud, we've got DFM. They're both in Group A in the World's Play-ins. That was along with Fnatic and EG. They both went 3-2. So they kind of tied there. And by the way, EG also went 3-2 in that play-in stage. And so they did pretty well. PCS was also in that group. So in the World's Tournament, that was Beyond Gaming. Now it's PSG. They went 2-3. And so, I mean, that's a pretty small sample size, and they were all pretty close in the same region.
Right.
As we look at Group B, that had the Chinese team, the Korean team, that had Mad Lions from Europe, had the Buffalo from Vietnam. Obviously, Gigabyte Marines did not play in the play-in stage in Worlds. They went straight to the group stage. Then we had the Latin American team, Icarus, and they went 1-4, beating only the Turkish team. And so looking at that, you would think that Loud and DFM are slight favorites over PSG. But then again, totally different teams, totally different meta, totally different time. You got to think it's close.
Yeah, I mean, I think not only that, but somebody within these organizations, considering we consistently, see their name pop up, is doing something right and has, obviously the experience, regardless of the players. Obviously, the players are, the ones playing,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe don't have as much experience on a stage like this. But these teams, not only, again, somebody has the experience, and clearly they've done something right within their domestic leagues to get here. So I don't see like any kind of like performance issues like on a stage fright per se, or like not understanding what's at stake here, and the stage per se, if that makes sense. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think they're going to give it their all for sure, and then whatever team, I think it's going to come down to like the draft, and obviously how they perform from there.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And so as we look at this, you're going to have to pick a couple players from these teams. I think looking at this Group B for your value plays is the right choice. As we pull up this bracket again, looking at Loud, PSG, DFM, I think that's the right choice just because, I mean, one of those teams is going to make it through, and they're going to be cheaper than Golden Guardians. And so where are you going with it? I think I heard you say PSG before.
Yeah, so me personally, I'm actually going to do a little dabbling in a couple teams here. So again, just going back to some of the stuff we already mentioned, you said you like Loud. Me personally, I think I prefer PSG talent.
Mm-hmm.
So are we going through like our lineups now, like the additional players?
I was just going to see if there are any players you particularly like of these teams, and then I'd go full lineup at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you one. I don't want to spoil the whole thing yet, but one player in particular that I'm looking for, it comes from PSG talent. I'm looking at the jungler.
Okay.
And forgive me if I butcher the name here, but I think it's Junji.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I'm going with I'll say Junji. Junji out of PSG in the jungle, and I'm primarily picking that because they are not in Group A with BLG, and they are some of the higher scoring players in terms of CS that we mentioned is going to play a big factor in this tournament.
Yeah, as we look in the spreadsheet that you've put together, points per dollar, he's the top jungler. Sorry, I thought that was actually points, but you got it points per dollar. But that means if everything goes according to how it was in their domestic league, he's going to be the best value. Let's see where he's at among junglers overall. Yeah, still the top. So he's the top scoring jungler in his, again, granted, in his domestic league. But you got to imagine that means he's getting his share of the kills, he's getting his share of the farm, and that's going to be a good pick. Looks like he's here at 195. Is that about right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 195. There he is.
Now, your favorite player, River, is sitting there at 198, only $3 difference. Do you dare swap over?
First, no. And then second, I think that might be the upset of the first round in either group. I think Gigabyte, I have no faith in Golden Guardians, even though they had the Cinderella run through LCS. Not to say that they're a bad team by any means, because I think they're better than most, at least currently in the LCS. I'll take that for whatever it's worth, given the state of the. But no, I mean, I know, I'm familiar with Gigabyte a little bit. I don't know how much of this same team is the team I remember. But I think if anyone's going to pull the upset, it's going to be them. In the first round, opening round.
Yeah, I would love that pick if they weren't against Golden Guardians, but they are. They've got Levi on the squad, who is the all-time classic player. Came to North America for a while, but he was the one in my favorite game of League of all time with the 4-minute level 6 Nocturne, the absolute fiesta against Fnatic. If you haven't watched that one, go check it out. I believe it's like 2017 or 18. Just the absolute wildest game I've ever seen. I'm going loud for this, and I'm still tinkering with my lineup. We got 4 days, so I'm not sure that this is how I'll finish. But I do like Tinones. He's been the best domestic mid laner for a while in the Latin American League. I remember being pretty high on him. I'm pretty sure I had him in my lineup for the group stage, for the play-in stage of the World Tournament back in October. And, I think if Loud does well, then he's going to do well. I think Loud has a great chance of getting that second spot out of Group B. And so I'm going there. And I'll probably end up with another Loud player. I've been trying to tinker with my lineup to see how to get 2 BLG and 2 G2 in there, and I'm not sure it's possible. So I'll probably end up with Tinones and maybe, I have it written down as Cross, but I'm pretty sure it's Croc. It's definitely Croc. That's a typo on my end. I'm pretty sure it's Croc. I'll probably end up with Croc if I can't get Yike in there. About a $60 difference between Croc and Yike, and so it certainly would allow me a lot more flexibility. But we'll see what I end up going by. I've got Loud as my sleepers, especially Tinones.
Nice. Okay.
All right, so lay it on me. What's the lineup?
Yeah, so in addition to the players I mentioned...
Just go top to bottom.
Top to bottom. Okay, fair enough. All right, so in the top, I have another PSG player. I have... oh, my goodness. I know it's like 4 letters, but it's throwing me off. Is it Ati? That sound right?
I have no idea.
Ashi? Okay.
How do you spell it?
Azhi. I probably...
Yeah, Ozzy. Sure.
Ozzy, okay. Yeah, so I have Ozzy from PSG. I have, like I mentioned, Junjia from PSG as well. And I have Yagao in the mid and Elk, both from BLG. Mm-hmm. And then the last pick I had, just, again, based on what you had said, and in terms of the team you like, and from Loud, I have at support, Steos.
All right, so hit me again. You've got Ozzy, you've got Junjia, you've got Yagao, you've got Elk.
Right.
And then who's the last one? Seos?
That's
support?
Seos. Correct.
All right, so I've got that squad on the team. 2 PSG, 2 BLG, 1 from Loud. You're skipping G2. You're skipping our beloved Golden Guardians and going with PSG as the second team out of Group B. Maybe even the first team out of Group B, and that would make you a happy man.
Right.
All right, my squad here. Let me pull it up once again. And again, I'm not committing to this, but what I have put together, I've got Bin in the top lane. I've got Croc in the jungle. I couldn't make Yike work, at least not yet. I went with Yagao in the mid lane. Went Seos also as the support, and then Han Sama in the bot lane. what I tried to do here is I tried to prioritize my top lane and my bot lane and make sure they played in different groups so that I could assign them captain on different days. That was kind of how I started it. So I took Bin, I took Han Sama, and then kind of filled it in my lineup from there. We took one of the most expensive in both of those roles. It just means there's not a lot left, which is why we end up with 2 loud players, but I'm okay with it. I'll probably end up with Tanoans in the mid lane once I really sit here, but I don't know. I don't know what to do. It's so hard to make these dang lineups.
Yeah, I know me personally. Even when we were talking, I went through like 4 or 5 different iterations of the lineup that I had spent probably like an hour on yesterday.
Yep.
I went through 10 iterations, so there's definitely a lot to consider.
Yeah, I've got my whiteboard all marked up, and it will be even more marked up once I'm done with it. So
right.
So yeah, that's what we've got for our lineups. We'll post these in the Discord. Don't steal them, but use them as inspiration. Anything else to touch on before we get out of here?
No. I think, like we said, it's definitely different than just, weekly fantasy. It's definitely something you got to keep up on if you want to do well on a day-to-day basis, especially with that captain pick and, obviously using your sell token correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you want to prioritize teams, as always, that you think are going to do better. And then if you're split between a couple players on different teams, you obviously want to go with the team you feel is going to do better overall. So just some things to definitely keep in mind when picking your lineup. But yeah, there's definitely a lot to nitpick, I guess you would say, as far as some of the differences go.
Yep. And there's a whole new strategy coming to the main stage, but we will get there when we get there. That'll be a whole nother episode. We'll probably do an episode on LCS stuff too. News is exploding, but we wanted to keep this one a little bit separate, so that is likely on the way too. I'm so excited for MSI. I love these international tournaments, and I love that we get to play fantasy and kind of duke it out. And someone's going to win $5,000. Now, hopefully that's someone from our group. Hopefully that's one of our listeners. The last couple times it's come down to just 3 or 4 points at the top, and that's the difference between assigning your captain on one day and not assigning your captain on one day. So we'll send out reminders, but definitely make sure you are on top of that. Once again, join our competition, our league. You have to once you go to leagues, you go to Discover Leagues, you hit Private Leagues, you put in the code. Code will be on Twitter, code will be in the Discord, code will be in the description of this episode on your favorite podcasting apps. Let's get out of here. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Pistons Wish. He's Ferris Biscuit. We are signing off. Peace out.
Good luck, everyone.